by anything I've seen in my lifetime, not normal times.
Yeah.
I mean, and the volatility, the constant churn and swirl in our world today, in our politics today, is something unlike anything I've ever seen, and it creates a lot of anxiety, honestly, for people, and sort of consternation about what's coming next, and what should I be worrying about. And I think the good news always is, for if you're a Jesus follower, is He's got this. He's in control.
Hey crew, it's Adam. You're listening to The Conversation today. We're at episode 268, and more than that, today is the fourth and final episode in our Politics and Faith series. And I just have to say, I am overwhelmed in the best way by the response that I've gotten from this series. Today, even again, I had several comments and direct messages and people stopping me just to say thank you for doing this series. Just know the honor is all mine. Today, wherever you are, just know I'm thrilled that you are tuning in. Before we go any further, though, I need to give a huge shout out to our partners. Each week, these partners help make the conversation possible. Our first partner is Vern Eide. Vern Eide Mitsubishi is a growing employee-owned company that strives to deliver dreams and transform lives. And Vern Eide's goal is excellence in everything that they do. And I'm to the point now that whenever I hear anybody talk about looking for a new vehicle, I immediately tell them, just go to Vern Eide. They're the best, and the difference that they're making in their community is incredible. Friends, whether it's a new Outlander, like I drive myself, or it's an Acura, Ford, Chevy, GMC, or Honda, you name the make of vehicle, they'll most likely have it, and no matter where you live, they will ship it to you. Go visit verneide.com. Our second partner today, I'm pumped about this. It's Tommy John Clothing. Let's go. If you haven't worn Tommy John, you are not living, okay? I absolutely love Tommy John. I'm wearing it as we speak. Tommy John now has thousands and thousands of 5-star reviews and over 20 million pairs of Tommy John sold. Whether it's undershirts or underwear or modern polos, you are gonna love Tommy John. My current favorite is their PJs. Who knew pajamas could be so awesome? I love Tommy John pajamas. To find out more and to go shopping, check out TommyJohn.com. Again, that's TommyJohn.com. Okay, so with Tommy John being a partner, here's why this is awesome for you. Every single week for the rest of the year, we are giving out two $50 Tommy John gift cards. Friends, all you need to do is two simple things and you'll be entered for a chance to win for the rest of the year. The two things. First off, go and subscribe to The Conversation on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That's the first thing. Secondly, go and subscribe and follow my YouTube channel. It's Adam A. Weber. Again, that's Adam A. Weber. Do those two things and then just let me know that you did those two things. Send me an email, drop me a DM, leave a comment, and you will be entered for a chance to win one of these two gift cards every single week. Today, though, again, as I mentioned, we are in the fourth and final episode of our Politics and Faith series. Just to stress this, across this series, we've heard from people across the political spectrum, from conservative to progressive. Also, I want to note, specifically with this episode, over the last 2 years, I just want you to know I've reached out to every single Christian Democrat currently in the U.S. Senate and in the U.S. House, and I haven't had any luck getting an interview. And I say that only as a disclosure. Just know that is an interview that I've tried to get time and time again. Today, though, to wrap up our series, I sat down with current U.S. Senator and Senate Minority Whip John Thune. John is from the great state of South Dakota. Hello. And he's currently in the race to become the Republican leader of the Senate. In this conversation, though, John shares about the current state of our country and how to best engage in politics. Specifically, I thought this was interesting, is John's advice on how to approach an elected official like himself in hopes of making a change. On that note, friends, as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation. John, well, given just the amount of years that you've been doing what you've done, you've seen a whole bunch. and yet it feels like the last couple of months in particular have been
Wow.
have been a little interesting.
Yeah.
Everything from Trump assassination attempt, Biden stepping down, Harris running for president. As a citizen, not even in your position, what are the feelings that you're feeling? Like just kind of taking it in yourself. Is it? I think a lot of people are like, "Is this the worst it's ever been?" Response to all of that, like what do you feel as a citizen, even like seeing everything that's taken place?
Well, I tell people, Adam, that these are, I mean, by anything I've seen in my lifetime, not normal times.
Yeah.
I mean, and the volatility, the constant churn and swirl in our world today, in our politics today, is something unlike anything I've ever seen, and it creates a lot of anxiety, honestly, for people, and sort of consternation about what's coming next, and what should I be worrying about. And I think the good news always is, for if you're a Jesus follower, is He's got this. He's in control, and you have to say that a lot these days. It's really true.
Yeah. So my hope with this series, we're doing a 4-part series on politics and faith, is to make it through election season without losing your mind or losing your soul.
Yeah.
Advice that you would have for any citizen on doing that. Like maybe start there. Like, what encouragement would you have for that person who's just like, I'm just angry right now, I'm jaded.
Right.
Thoughts on that?
Well, I think sometimes it's important for Americans to put things in perspective. I mean, we have a short-term view right now, especially in the world of social media and iPhones. The news cycle is virtual; it's constant.
Yeah.
But I think you have to kind of remember the long game, and where we've come from as a country, and some of the challenges we faced in the past. Chaplain Black, who you've met. Whenever people start talking about how hard times are in America and we've never seen stuff like this, and he goes, well, we've been through some hard times. He goes, slavery was hard. The Civil War was hard.
Yeah.
And some of the things in the last century that we've been through. So I think perspective is important. Secondly, I would tell people, I think it's really important to diversify your sources of news and information, because right now you have a lot of people who they'll go to one particular site, generally online, to get their information, and I blame the algorithms. And then the algorithms kick in, they double down, and the social media platforms want to keep you on their site as long as possible, so that's how they monetize it, and so you're not hearing the other side. And I think it's really important. And not necessarily because you're going to agree with what the other side has to say, but just understand where they're coming from. And I think have disagreements, but do it in a respectful way. And I think that's really critical too.
I love that. Seriously, I think people would be shocked to hear that from a politician saying that, and yet that's, for me, is super refreshing. And really, these first couple of questions I'm asking you, John, I'm asking because of just who you are as a person, even just away from your position. And so I just think that carries so much. How, maybe tied to this, how do you stay grounded? I told my lawyer friend the other day, I'm like, I don't know how you still have a soul. And he started laughing. But even for you, it's not just, just stay away from Twitter and you're fine. It's like, no, it's actually my job. Like, I'm in this. So I feel like if anybody has learned a thing or two, it's you in this area. Like, genuinely, if you tried to put like nuts and bolts, what keeps you grounded, and maybe specifically what keeps you just from being angry, and it's okay if you are angry.
Well, I think you have to try and the content that you take in, focus on what's helpful, not what's stressful. And there's a certain amount of this you have to do. It comes with my job, like you said, and anybody, and there are lots of professions now where you kind of have to know what's going on around you. And so it's impossible to really completely divorce yourself or cut yourself off from social media. But I do think, there's for a Jesus follower, a believer, there are some basic principles. Rick Warren always talked about first word God's word, last word's God's word. So in other words, in the morning, before you get up and get on that iPhone, do something that is good for your soul, and get into the Word or spend some time in prayer or in solitude and meditation. And then at night, before you go to bed, don't make that the last thing you do. Is stay on that social media or on that phone. So I think there are some things you can do to help sort of lessen that anger, that anxiety, that fear that so many people are experiencing in today's world. And I think it really does start with being conscious of how much of that stuff you're taking in. It's okay. You need some of it to do your profession, but don't let it consume you, because it can. It really can. And I think so. Focus on what's and even when it comes to television, if you're watching TV, cable news 24/7, man, you're going to be in a dark place. I mean, you really are. And so I think you just you've got to limit it and be wise. And then, we need solitude in this day and age. There's so much noise. And I think Satan really uses noise. That was a Corrie ten Boom line. If Satan can't, if he can't tempt you, he'll distract you. He'll get you going in all kinds of different directions.
That's good. Actually, a non-politics question, and you don't have to answer this. Have you ever struggled, this is a leadership question, have you ever struggled with anger as far as like just being run thin, burnt out, whatever, whether it's about politics in your job or just the pace of life? And if so, how did you get back out of that? Because for me, something I've been struggling with, honestly, is just the pace. It's like, this is unsustainable.
Yeah.
And then I can tell I'm easily frustrated.
Yeah.
I'm quick to snap at the dumb, it's like, I'm not actually angry at this. It's this. Anything there, John? Like, as far as like how to get out of that?
Yeah. And and we all struggle with that. And you can tell when you're getting to that point because you snap, you get short. You get short with your spouse, you get short with your kids, in my case, my grandkids, and with other people. And I think that it really is important that to slow it down, because I hit the wall and I can tell when it's happening. When I start burning out, I can feel it coming on. I can feel, my impulses, the way I react and instincts and stuff like that. And so that's where you have to, kind of just pump the brakes.
Yeah.
And I think
is that like kind of dropping some commitments?
Yes. Yeah. You got to learn to say no. And it's really hard. I mean, in some jobs, it's especially hard, but it really is true. Our life is very hurried. It's very fast. It's very distracted. And it makes it virtually impossible to pull back and reflect. And do things that are good for your soul. And I just think if you, at least in my world, and I've been there, I've hit that wall, and so I kind of see it now. I detect it. I know when it's coming, and I just realize, okay, I can't. You can't do everything. You can't be everything to everybody, and you're not going to make people happy all the time. You just have to accept that as a basic premise, and understand that you do the best that you can as the good Lord gives you strength.
Yeah.
And trust Him for that, and realize that His grace is sufficient. But there are just limits, and you have to know where they are, and start adapting your practices, your lifestyle when you start hitting that.
Yeah, that's so good. This kind of random to share, but I feel like so I am driven. My strong suit is my work ethic.
Yeah.
But I want to say a couple years back, probably around 39, 40, I began to hit almost a physical wall.
Yeah.
And I feel like it was honestly God's kindness.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I'd want to put in 2 more hours, and he'd just be like, "It's not happening." Like, basically, I felt like God was literally in the room, like, it's time to leave. It's time to go home.
And you're probably, I'm like that too. And I'm Scandinavian, so we expect life to be hard. and I've always felt too that the thing that I had over other people is I'm willing to do things, work harder, do things other people aren't willing to do. But we all have our physiological sort of limits. We're all wired differently.
Yeah.
And you have to sense that about yourself. And sometimes you don't until you've crossed over that line, gone too far, and then God gets your attention.
Yeah. Hey friends, I want to jump in really quick just to tell you, do not forget to enter a chance to win one of these 2 $50 Tommy John gift cards by doing these 2 simple things. First off, just go subscribe to the conversation on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. And secondly, just go and follow me at my YouTube channel, Adam A. Weber, and you will be entered for a chance to win one of these $50 gift cards every single week for the rest of the year. Let's get back to our conversation. Okay, so back to politics.
Yeah.
Your best practical advice for actually how to engage in politics. For me, my natural default is my vote isn't going to matter, and my voice isn't going to matter. Everybody's just yelling at each other, and so as
Yeah.
a citizen, a lot of times I'm like, I'm gonna go do things that I know I can make a difference with, and then
Yeah.
just not being involved in politics. Like advice on how to actually, whether it's this election cycle or just like in the next few years, advice on how to engage in ways that you've actually seen the ball move. Because again, it just feels like right now, I
Right.
think people are like, well, the way to engage is yell all over Facebook. And I'm like, well, that doesn't do anything except make people disrespect you, basically, or lose your respect. But any thoughts on that?
Well, I think, again, that I think it's important that you engage with the culture, and politics is part of our
Yeah.
culture. And I think God wants us to be out there being salt and light in the culture. And there's also, there's some scriptures that speak to this issue too.
Yeah.
So I don't think he expects people to be completely divorced from it. I don't think
Yeah.
he expects people either to be obsessed with it. I mean, you don't. So, but I think there's a happy medium there, and I think a lot of it comes down to sort of what your some people have a bent toward it, and they kind of get addicted to it, and that's an extreme too. But I think for the average person out there, if you want to engage in politics, there are lots of places you can go to get news and information that will tell you about it. And I usually will tell people kind of depending on where they are in their politics, here's where you can go to get if information that
Yeah.
maybe reflects your sort of view of the issues.
Yeah.
But I always, like I said earlier, I think it's important to hear both sides. And I think you need to, respect other people's views, knowing that we can disagree in a way that doesn't necessarily make it antagonistic toward each other. But I think just, if you like a candidate or somebody who's involved in politics,
Yeah.
get a little bit more involved.
Yeah.
Ask them to volunteer maybe on their campaign, and you learn more about it when you do that. I think there's, there are, whatever your political party is.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
people have all kinds of different political persuasions, but generally speaking, there are people that you identify with.
Yep.
And it tends to be if you relate to somebody really well, get into a conversation with them, engage them, and kind of find out what makes them tick, and realize that your vote does matter. I mean, one of the things that I remind people about, especially when I'm talking to young people, is, I had 2 elections in South Dakota that were decided by a combined total of about 5,000 votes.
Yeah.
So I lost one by 524 votes, won one by 4,508 votes.
Crazy.
Both numbers tattooed on my brain. And so, a lot of people tend to be cynical. And
Yeah.
they're like, you know what, it doesn't matter. And I'm like, no, your vote does matter. And, the kind of world we're going to live in, the leadership that we get, comes down to our willingness to be able to participate. And I think there's an expectation, whether you like it or not, that we ought to vote.
Yes.
At least at a minimum level. But then beyond that, if you've got a candidate you like who articulates and stands for the things you believe in, get involved on more than just a vote level.
Yeah. Just to follow up, do you see things like writing letters to your representative, or does that do anything? I'm trying to think of anything else, like here's like 2 or 3 other things. Like there's an issue that I'm really passionate about. What should I do to help move forward that issue? Any other things there?
Yeah, I mean, I think email now is a lot of that, phone calls, and it's especially, in our office at least, we're going to prioritize people who are from South Dakota.
Yeah.
We get calls from all over the country.
Sure.
If somebody sees you on cable news, and they want to throw bombs, and so they call the office, and so we field a lot of that incoming calls. But if you do contact an office
Yeah.
of an elected official, I think one, know what you want to say. Try and summarize it as much as you can succinctly. And there's no substitute for personal contact. I think that if you can engage somebody on a personal level, go see them. Again, being respectful and mindful that sometimes there's a lot of people can be very busy, but the people who are most effective, in my view, are people who know what they want to say, that say it directly, and engage in a personal way. I mean, if you're throwing bombs from cover on social media or something like that, you're probably not going to get. Nowadays, in fact, nowadays you don't know whether it's a troll or not, what's real and what's not. And that's only going to intensify as we get into the world of artificial intelligence. But so I think a personal contact where you engage somebody and look them in the eye.
That's great.
Is shake their hand and
Thanks for
tell
that.
them you're praying for them.
Well, thanks for that. Because again, John, like my natural tendency is to back away. I vote every single time I've had a chance to vote since I was able to, age-wise. I've voted, but my natural tendency is, and I'm so grateful for those people who see like I want to change a system though. I don't want to just help the person in front of me. I'm much more apt to help the person in front of me, to help the group of people in front of me. For me, the system, that's such a bear cat. I'm not going to touch that. And so I'm grateful for people like yourself who want to serve and make a difference in that way. Faith-wise, I just got a couple last questions. Faith-wise, you mentioned like as Jesus followers, we should be engaged with our culture and politics. Any other like pro tips for the Jesus follower and how they engage in politics, as far as like make sure you don't lose your witness, and make sure like anything else that way that you just like, here's just a few things I would tell Jesus followers when it comes to like politics.
It's really true. And I think, when people engage me in church too, if they're angry and yelling and that sort of thing, it has a lot less impact than somebody who comes in and is reasonable and rational and thoughtful and everything else. So
basic humanity 101.
Yeah, and so it is. It's kind of 101. But I've kind of adopted one of my sort of life verses and verses that I apply to politics in Proverbs chapter 3. Verses 1 and 2. It talks about my son, do not forget my commandments. Let your heart keep my commandments. The length of days, years of life, and peace they will add to you. But then 3 and 4, it says, do not let kindness and truth leave you. Now, some translations say love and faithfulness, but the NASB says kindness and truth. Bind them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart, for so you will find favor and good repute in the sight of both God and people. And so I think speak the truth. But do it in a spirit of kindness. And it's getting increasingly hard with all the misinformation and stuff out there now to determine what's true and what isn't. And what's real and what's not, and what's and that's going to continue to be a challenge. But I think sticking to the core of the Scripture and speak the truth, do it in a spirit of kindness. And it's New Testament too. It's growing. I'm thinking of the passage here. Grow up into all aspects unto Him who is the head, even Christ. Speaking the truth in love. Grow up into all aspects unto Him. So, I think just as you approach elected officials, and this is the way I kind of approach my job. Keep those sort of parameters out there: kindness and truth. Truth and love, and those are the. I know it contradicts and it goes against the culture and the ethos of where we are today when it comes to our politics. There's a lot of anger, a lot of fear. I've always believed that politics ought to be about appealing to people's hopes, not preying on their fears. And I think too much of politics today is about fear. And so I think you want to be aspirational and optimistic and hopeful. And in this country, we should be. You look at every other country around the world and think how blessed we are.
Last question, John. I think what I see, most people would see DC, and not just DC, but Facebook. It's so black and white. You're either on my team or you're an enemy. And then when I was out in DC, I felt like I saw something different, and maybe I saw the pretty polished version. but what I experienced even at the Senate Bible study was Democrats and Republicans actually dialoguing, and I could feel who in the room without knowing who they were, who was the Democrat and who was a Republican. So they didn't vanilla all their words. They didn't vanilla their actual viewpoints. You could hear that coming out, and yet I'm like, if there could be a camera in this room, I think our country would be like, you mean they talk to each other? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so like I'm not even really sure what the question is. It feels like the common sense Republican and common sense Democrat is gone. Do you see any world where that can come back, where you don't have to be edge and focus on people's fears. I don't know. Is there any hope of that returning? And maybe it's just through one elected official at a time, or
yeah. I mean, I think it really starts by example in leadership. You got to have people who model that, because otherwise, it's the temptation nowadays with social media platforms, and then now online digital fundraising. So people, they'll use their social media presence to raise money. And then now with 10 years ago, there's a Supreme Court decision that allowed the advent of super PACs. So there's just money pouring into politics, which pushes people to the edges instead of bringing them together. And, and that's unfortunately kind of it is a feature of modern politics. And I'm not sure to your question about whether or not we can go back, but I think you have to, you got to set that example. It's about tone, it's about style, it's about how you say things. And by the way, it was great having you there, kick off the Senate with prayer. And I'm grateful that we still start the Senate each day with prayer. And having you as a guest chaplain it was very special to have you out there. And I think that Chaplain Black, who, as you said, leads our study, does a great job of moderating the different political views and personalities that he deals with on a daily basis, and tries to keep everything kind of focused back on being Jesus followers and the scriptures.
Yeah, that was one of the most rock solid Bible studies I've ever been a part of. It was the opposite of vanilla. Chaplain Black is not going to vanilla much of anything, and I just thought it was incredible to not only be in the room with him, but to be in a room where it's like, hey, there's actually differing viewpoints, and yet we're all following the same Jesus. And whether you're a Christian or not, it's like you actually can come to the table with people who differ from you for the benefit and the good of all. And so, that was
I mean, in just his last, I think again, and he would say, I think I mentioned this to you a while back, that the last couple times we met, and we were out of session now, which is usually an applause line when I say conference session, people, it means we can't do any damage. But the chaplain just, his thing was read Matthew 5, 6, and 7, read the Sermon on the Mount, and see what Jesus said about how to live, and model that. And I think sometimes that, we get caught in this universe of throwing bombs back and forth, and it's easy to do that, but there are people who have a different sort of view on some of the major policy issues from you. But hopefully we can still find a way to come together in a spirit of at times of unity. And sometimes it takes a crisis to make that happen, which is unfortunate. It should happen on more of a daily basis. But we need to be able to see past those differences and focus on the human there, the person there, and realize we all need Jesus, and we all need more of his grace and mercy on a daily basis.
Well, friends, I hope you enjoyed and were encouraged and maybe challenged by what John had to share. Thanks again to John Thune for being willing to sit down with me in person. I specifically love being able to do an interview in person. Thanks to our partners, both Vern Eide and Tommy John, who helped make this episode possible. Go check out both of them. And lastly, but not leastly, thanks to each and every one of you who listens to the conversation. Friends, have a great rest of your day.